Kevin Costner, you've got a great new role in this movie, Hidden Figures, which will be out around Christmas time. What about Al intrigued you that made you want to play him?
Well, in fairness, I didn't really want to play him. I really liked the screenplay when it was presented to me, and they asked if I wanted to play Al Harrison, and I felt that he hadn't been really developed the way the other characters had, and I said, look, I think you got a really good movie here. I said, but I don't see myself playing Al Harrison, and the word came back, Ted Melfi, who wrote it, said, well, why? What's the deal? And I said, well, it's a little schizophrenic, man. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, and this wasn't just easy for me to say because he's a writer, and he has feelings, and so I have to be very careful. But this movie was up and going, and so there wasn't a lot of time to get things like this said. So I said, it's a little schizophrenic. What do you mean? He says, and I say, well, look, he's saying this on this page, and he's saying that. Now, I don't have a problem playing a schizophrenic, but I need to know why, and so does the audience, why he's that way. And so Ted was a little quiet when I said that. And he said, well, the reality is I had the hardest time writing him because he was the character that I didn't get the rights to. And so he's really a composition character made up of 3 different people. And I said, well, bingo, right? That's the problem here. And he said, yeah. He said, so I wasn't able to really concentrate on him. And I said, okay. Ted was really honest, and I appreciated that. I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I said, we need to even this out, and we need to create an authentic character that we can combine who these men were, or we can try to single one out and avoid whatever we did. But I said, will you do that? I said, because people will say things to me all the time to get me in a movie. We'll fix it. But what happens is once the movie starts, the director's tired at night, and he doesn't want to go home at the end of the night and start writing a supporting character, which this was going to be. But Ted was true to his word. He did. And he said we would work on it, and we did every night.
Was he more impressed that you figured out the nature of the 3 men, or were you more impressed that you caught it?
Well, I think, when you have a really good collaboration, there comes a moment where you don't remember who said what anymore. It's not even really important. I think we probably riffed off each other's ideas. Like I said, he's a really good writer, and he understood what was missing, and we went searching for it, and he allowed me a room to go searching, and he would ultimately decide what got in that film and what didn't. But what made it was enough for me to say I can support this movie.
It's been over 50 years since the events of this happened at NASA. Why now, and why do you think it's taken so long for this story to come out?
Well, look, I did a movie called The Bodyguard, and that was the first screenplay that Lawrence Kasdan ever sold, and it didn't get made for 16 years. I did The Hatfield and McCoys, and from the point that somebody wanted to make that story, the one that I did, was 30 years. Some things come together very quick. Some things take their time. I don't know if I'm embarrassed or I'm ashamed that I didn't know this story existed. But I'm thrilled, and I think to myself, knothead, why didn't you know? Of course, there are African-American people that have contributed in so many ways in this country, and why would I be surprised that in this particular film, with everything on the line, it came down to old-fashioned math, and a little girl who we saw in this movie as an 8-year-old who could completely blow a college room away became that woman that John Glenn said yes to. I was really thrilled when I read that, and I was equally naive to know that long before this computers that you and I are talking on right now, human beings were called computers at NASA. So I was a little charmed by the story.
The 3 ladies that are kind of the central point of the group, you worked a lot with Taraji P. Henson, who plays Katherine Johnson.
Okay, yeah, in that movie I worked with Taraji, you're right.
Right. What about her? Did you enjoy working with her?
Well, she was, always, it's just going to sound really boring to this audience, but, she was ready to work, right? She was prepared, and sometimes people aren't. Okay, and sometimes and she was ready, and she had a lot to do, and she was portraying somebody that's really important to African Americans, and equally important to the space program, to the history of what we know to be a big moment in the space program. And you know, it whittled down to this little girl turned into a full-blown grown woman. And I thought Taraji really handled that. And you know, she has that one scene where she's been really marginalized, if you will. You know, race is a terrible thing, and it's hard enough for a woman in a workplace in the 60s, but to be a black woman in the 60s was impossible. And there's a moment in time, and I think you know the moment I'm talking about, where she finally breaks and tries to explain what life has been like for her in this workplace amongst all these white men. And so she really nailed that scene beautifully. And of course, that scene doved into the coffee pot scene, and then it doved into the hallway scene that people are talking about a little bit. But without her speech, without me being angry at her, without her big speech, without the coffee pot, the thing that happens in the hall, even though it's impactful, wouldn't have been as impactful.
Yeah, at the screening I saw, and you and the rest of the cast and Ted were there for the Q&A after, I thought the audience was going to get up and storm the stage, and not in a bad way, in like an inspirational way, in your hallway scene.
Yeah, I think we all want to. The great thing about movies is it gives us a chance to do some things that we would hope we would do in real life. Not that we would or could, or the norms of the time, but I think there's a moment where we all want to tear some stuff down that's holding people back. We all wish we were that heroic. I hope I am that way in my life. But, you know, that was sometimes, you know, I knew when I was tearing that sign down that I was tearing it down for a lot of people.
The inspirational nature of this movie, I just feel like the country needs something like this right now. What kind of reactions are you expecting once the whole country gets to see it?
I don't know. You know, I don't do movies that are in vogue. I don't do them about, you know, what seems to be a style of movie that's being made or whatever. I've always felt a little bit personally out of step with Hollywood. I love it. I've made my movies. I've had my successes, but I don't tend to follow what's popular at the time. Not because I don't like it. It's just I'm usually interested in something else. And so the idea of what I hope is that I hope people see what I thought I saw in this movie, which was I was thrilled by it. I was disappointed in our own history, but I was thrilled that we overcame it, and that the cream did get to the top. You know.
Throughout your career, you've done a lot of period movies. Why does that, going back decades or centuries, why does that appeal to you so much?
Well, I don't know. I'm not afraid to go back, you know, and travel in time. But things just have to make sense, you know, to me, that I have to be moved by them myself before I'm willing to, you know, you don't tell a joke unless you think it's actually pretty good, unless you're just a dumbass, you know, and because you know how flat that can go in a party, right? I think we all understand that. So you have to have a little sense in your head that the thing that you're asking people to come see, to pay money to come see it, that they're going to have a chance to be thrilled. And movies can be about a lot of things. They can be about comedies, they can be about history, they can be, you know, love stories. But you got to feel like they can add up to something for that audience that you're intending it for. And for people that feel like they want to see this story, I felt like that this movie had a chance to be those things that you have described as something that seems in a way current, that seems like maybe something we need. I think we just need to be reminded that we, as human beings, that if we give people a chance, it's what can come of it is unmeasurable.
We're an awards website. I want to ask you just a couple of quick questions about your career. Dances with Wolves, 2 Oscar wins. You go into the ceremony with Producers Guild win, Directors Guild, Golden Globes. What were your thoughts as you entered the room? Did you feel like, okay, this is ours?
No, I think just the opposite. I mean, I'm I'm thinking, man, somebody else's music is going to play. And what I mean by that is usually they play if your movie wins, they play the theme from that score of that movie that people have come to know very, very well. It becomes indelible in the minds of people, certain music. And I was pretty convinced in a way that somebody else's name was going to be called. I was going to be okay with that. But, it just happened to start happening. And it was a good reminder to me, just the same way as Hidden Figures is, the same way as the Hatfields was, that I need to be about what interests me. I mean, I did a little movie called Black or White a year and a half ago. I don't know if you saw it.
That's a wonderful movie.
Thank you. And, that was right in the middle of everything that's been going on. And for some reason, no one talked about that movie that much. So anybody that happens to be watching right now, if you haven't seen Black or White, I hope you go see that. But, if you kind of do the movies you feel like you want to, and believe me, there's all styles of movie that you can be in, it's the fact that you like it so much and people are talking about this, it's always a good reminder to me to follow my instinct about what moves me, what makes me feel good, not what in the very beginning seems like it's going to be something that becomes a hit or something like that. I think I know the difference between, I think I know what a good movie is. What I'm not always certain about is what a hit is. But I have to be about the movie that can be watched 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I think Hidden Figures will have that going for it, regardless of what happens comes award season.
On that Oscar night, it had to be at least a little bit of a sign when Billy Crystal comes out on stage at the opening on a horse in the pose that you had in the movie. That had to tickle you.
Well, he's one of the best guys. I mean, we've had Bob Hope and Johnny Carson, but our generation had Billy Crystal, and it's been very hard for people to match up with that 7, 8, 10-year run that he did. I'm not even sure how long it was, but he made me feel special. He forces you to laugh at yourself. He's somebody that is a giant in our business.
On Hatfield, you did something very few people have done on the TV side, and that's you won an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a SAG award for your role. Why did it go over so well? What was it about that character and that project?
I never thought that it had that. I mean, it was History Channel's first movie. I like history. You kind of brought that up. I'm in love with writing, and when writing moves me, I think it has a chance to move other people if you can perform it at a pretty high level. It's a very American story. No one's ever confused me for being anything other than American, so it was a good fit for me. But again, there was no kind of anticipatory kind of feeling that this would somehow move its way into award season. I made that simply because that is an interesting time in our history. It's a story that people think they know somehow, not necessarily do know, and it was just done really well.
One last question. Whenever I have an Oscar voter on, I love to ask this. You've been voting a good while, and I guess you get to nominate in the acting, directing, and producing side, right? Since you've had nominations in all of those.
Yeah, you do.
What type? You don't have to give specifics, but what types of especially acting performances really trigger you, make you want to vote for them?
Well, there's different kinds of acting that happens. I mean, a lot of times we look at the flashiest things. If you're doing something with a lisp or a limp, and we go, "Ooh, look how interesting that is. That's so interesting." And sometimes there's performances where you just, like Spencer Tracy, you just stand there and deliver. And you let the story, you give it a level of weight, hopefully, just because the words are important and you don't have to do the dance. But you know, there are times in movies where you can disappear into a role, and there's times where you just have to stand for a role. And both things are hard to do. They're hard to do. I think you know, so I think actors look at things and they understand, and they know when a role has a lot of flash, and they also know when a role has just a lot of substance too. That it's your job not to draw so much attention to yourself, but to the story itself, you know, and find a way theatrically to make a jump with it.
Well, that is exactly what you do here in Hidden Figures. It's one of the best movies I've seen all year, and I'm really hoping the public will get out and see it here around Christmas time.
Yeah, they got to go somewhere. Why not go see Hidden Figures?
It'll have them standing up in their seats and cheering, right?
There you go.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Oh, I appreciate it.